Off the addiction medicine CME series for the 2023 and 2024 years. Can't believe it's another year already. Our speaker today is a personal friend and somebody I graduated med school with. And so this is Dr. Jason Kirby, and his title today will be Healing the Healer, One Physician's Journey of Redemption. And Dr. Kirby is a board-certified addiction medicine specialist, recovery champion, and behavioral health expert, and is currently the chief medical officer at Landmark Recovery, a national drug and alcohol residential treatment organization based in Franklin, Tennessee. He is certified by the American Board of Preventative Medicine. He has treated thousands of patients in his career struggling from a variety of substance use disorders and practiced full administrative addiction medicine for Landmark Recovery. Dr. Kirby is a clinical leader for the organization and is responsible for development of Landmark's policies and procedures governing evidence-based and harm reduction practices, as well as liaison for all regulatory matters. He also serves as in leadership in the American Society of Addiction Medicine as president of the Tennessee chapter of ASAM, and is a member of the Finance, Legislative, Conference Planning, and Level of Care committees. Way busier than even I am. He also helps with the withdrawal management subcommittees as well. Recently, he co-authored portions of the 4th edition of ASAM's criteria, which is scheduled to be published this fall. And Dr. Kirby was granted fellow status in May of 2020 and has trained dozens of physicians and physician extenders in addiction medicine and spoken at a variety of conferences, given lectures, grand rounds, all focusing on diagnosis, prevention, and the treatment of substance use disorders and other process addictions in special populations. So it's with my pleasure to welcome Dr. Kirby. And just some quick housekeeping. How you obtain CME for our series is you're going to text this code 278818 to phone number 1-866-327-3062. Steve, our program coordinator, also just dropped it in the chat, and we'll be dropping it here and there. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kirby.
Thank you, Dr. Gum. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be with you. I love talking to folks. I love talking to people who share in this work, who do the tough work of taking care of people who really can't take care of themselves. And what I'm going to bring to you guys today is a little bit personal. And so I'm going to try to tie some educational directives along with the personal. So this is a little bit tough for me. I share my story fairly often, but every single time it's a little bit anxiety provoking. So I apologize if I have to take a little bit of a break, a couple seconds breather and ground myself. And but we're going to get through it. And I'm super excited for you guys to know that you don't have to be poor and a minority and, whatever you want to call it, bottom of the barrel to have a substance use disorder or process addiction. It can happen to anybody at any time. And it happened to me. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys about that. So I'm going to try to get through this in maybe 45 minutes and save the last 10 to 15 minutes for questions, because I'd love to answer your guys' questions. This is probably not going to be super comprehensive, but it'll be enough to give you guys the ability to see into my journey and see the resources and the pathways and the supports that I had to help me get to where I am today. So thank you again, Dr. Gum, for inviting me. I'm super excited to be with you. So I have no disclosures. And so today we're going to identify substance use disorder as an equal opportunity life destroyer. That's exactly how I teach it when I teach it to other physicians and physician extenders. Addiction has no preference on nationality, race, creed, socioeconomic status. It attacks us all. It's in every country in this world, and about 10% of folks who walk around every day, the 280 Americans, have a diagnosable substance use disorder, and only about 6 to 10% actually try to engage in treatment. So we have a long way to go. We're also going to talk about the treatment of physicians with process addictions, because this is a different thing. When you're talking about the general population versus a safety specific occupation, there are some specific things you have to take into account in order to get those folks back to work, which is the ultimate goal. Remember, functionality is the ultimate goal. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the Physicians Health Program, just in general, not anything specific. Full transparency, I don't know much information about the Arizona PHP, but I will talk about the Federation of State PHPs and the PHPs in which I am familiar with. But to be honest with you, most of them have around the same guidelines. They have their own nuances, but the gist is the same. And we're going to identify some community and state resources to help us get back to work. Because like I said, that's the ultimate goal. How can we heal ourselves and get back to healing others? But we have to heal ourselves first. So let me tell you a little bit about my story. So I grew up in Southern West Virginia, in the coal fields of Southern West Virginia. I was born in, that's me to the left there, obviously, my dad, and then my little brother. I was born in Norfolk, Virginia. My dad was he was a laborer on the carriers down there, in the Norfolk shipyards. My mom was a nurse, and I was born into a, lower middle class, working class, whatever you want to call it, family in Norfolk, Virginia, and nothing to really write home about. We had our own house. My grandparents lived maybe 1.5 miles down the road. We ended up moving when I was 4 up to West Virginia, where my dad was originally from, in a town called Lewisburg, West Virginia. And my dad started his own company. He always wanted to start his own business. And so he ended up taking out a loan, and he opened up a mechanic shop. My mom went to work for the local hospital as a ICU nurse, and I went into school. Well, all of that is all well and good. And but there's obviously some darkness in every family, and there was some in mine. So my dad was a functional person with alcohol use disorder my entire life. I remember very, very vividly, every single morning waking up when I was young, when I would be getting ready for school, he would wake up. He'd usually wake up around 5:30 a.m. He was a super early riser. He would throw up probably for the first 2 or 3 minutes, and then he would come out, and he'd come out of the bathroom, and he would wipe off his face, and he'd grab a cup of coffee, and he'd sit down and have a cup of coffee. And that was pretty much every morning. Every time I remember asking about it a few times, and it was just always something that my brother, my mom, and we just kind of acknowledged, but we just kind of moved on. Mental health was not something we talked about in my house at all. To my dad, any type of behavioral or mental health problem was a weakness. And there was no such thing as depression. There was no such thing as crying. There was no such thing as, looking weak. You had to, you had to be a man. You had to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just get on with it. And that's what my dad did, and my dad, unlike a lot of functional people with an alcohol use disorder, he went to work every single day, no matter how sick he was. He went to work. And, when he would come home, it would be kind of a very similar pattern. He would, usually drink a few beers on his way home. And when he would get home, he would have dinner, and then he would isolate, and that's when he would break out the bottle of Jim Beam. And that's when things would really get kind of toasty lit. And that's usually when I would kind of go into my room and just not really come out much. Dad was not a very fun person to be around whenever he was drunk. Whenever he wasn't drunk, he was very isolative. It was hard for him to open up. Him and I didn't have a wonderful relationship. We didn't really understand one another very much at all. I knew he loved me, or I thought he loved me, but I never understood why he never came to my baseball games and my soccer games, and I never understood why he didn't, want to play catch with me in the yard and do all these other things. And so I grew up very insecure. I grew up, I grew up very insecure. I grew up very lonely, and all I wanted to do was try to understand my parents. And my mom worked a lot. She worked, like I said, in the ICU, and so she worked nights mainly. And I mean, she was your classic codependent and enabler. She saw how dad was, and there was always an excuse. Dad worked really hard and he deserves it, or things didn't go well today, Jace. Just give your dad some time, and whatever the case may be. My dad, he was not a very good businessman, and so as the years went on, the business didn't do very well. Him and my mom fought a lot. There was a lot of verbal abuse, no physical abuse, but there was a lot of verbal abuse back and forth with him and my mom, because financial times were so tight. I remember moving about, it wasn't about, it was exactly 8 times between the ages of 5 and 18. I moved all over Greenbrier County, West Virginia. And I never really grounded myself, and never really rooted myself. Hid a lot. I would isolate kind of in my room and just read books, and that and trying to do things with we had a bunch of animals at the time. We had a farm. Then I would be off reading or at school or whatever the case may be. The insecurities continued all through elementary school and into junior high. I tried my first drink of beer at 9 years old. My dad gave me a sip of his Miller Lite when I was 9. He thought it was funny, and I hated the taste. My first drunk was at age 15. It was after a football game. We played Bluefield High School, Southern West Virginia. There's very predictable rivalries, and Greenbrier East always played Bluefield, and Bluefield destroyed us, but it was always a lot of fun. I still remember it to this day, actually. And I don't know if you've ever had any patients of yours say, I remember my first drunk like it was the second coming of Jesus, and it really was. It was a beautiful, crisp, clear fall night in Southern West Virginia. The moon was full, and my buddy and me, we hiked up to a hill about 500 yards from my house, and I had bought a pint of Jack Daniels from my older brother, my older half brother, and my buddy and I, we decided we were going to drink it that night. So we took it up to the top of the hill, and we sat there, we shot the shit, and just were talking with each other. We cracked the bottle, and he took the first swig and burned, and he hated it. And then he gave it to me. And I still remember to this day, almost, more than 20 years ago, almost 25 years ago now, how much it burned going down, but how freeing of a feeling that it felt. As soon as I got that warmth, there's a warmth that comes as soon as you drink a decent amount of liquor. And man, I just was like, oh man, this is it. This is it for me. I'm going to do this the rest of my life. And and so I drank fairly socially most of high school. It didn't really become compulsive through high school. I held it together quite a bit. This is me right here. This is my senior year in high school. Towards my junior and senior year, I started dabbling into other substances. I'm a big fan, or I was a big fan of dissociatives. I never liked being me. I never felt comfortable being me. I always felt better when I was taking a vacation from being me. So this is actually me on a DXM trip um, in Hawaii my senior year. And the guy next to me is also on a DXM trip as well. So yeah, and so I did mention, or I'm sorry, I did not mention, I do have a history of sexual trauma. I'm not going to really talk about that much right now, but I did also have a history of sexual trauma when I was 4, before we moved up to West Virginia. I don't remember it much, and that's why I'm not really going to talk about it. But my point in talking about all this is that every single one of these things was a different adverse childhood experience. And for me, I had a plethora of adverse childhood experiences, from moving 8 times to being insecure in my own household, to being afraid of my father when he was drunk, being not being able to trust my mother when she was gone. It was just it was a lot. So made it through high school, and I used to be a pretty smart person, I think. At least I think so. I got through high school. I didn't really have to try that hard to do it. Ended up going to WVU on West Virginia University on a scholarship. And thank goodness, because I was the first person in my family to go to college. So I had no clue how to do it. And most of college was, most of college was a lot of drinking. It was a lot of drinking, a lot of cocaine, a lot of cannabis, but mostly drinking. Drinking has always been my go-to. I went through most of my late adolescence, early 20s. That level of I didn't have to do it, or I didn't feel normal yet. It was about 21, 22 when that light switch flipped. Addiction would probably say the same thing. It's like a light switch flips, and one day you're one type of person, and then all of a sudden, the next day you're a completely different type of person. And now it wasn't just me drinking to have a good time. Now I had to drink or I did not feel normal. And that was pretty much my junior year and senior year in college. So I'll talk about college in 1 second, but to go into adverse childhood experiences, and this is directly from the CDC. So, they're extremely common. I know for a fact that we are doing a lot more research into ACEs now, as we should, and we are correlating ACEs to the risk stratification for process addictions. Remember that 70% of folks with a substance use disorder are going to, at least 70% of folks who have a substance use disorder also have some underlying trauma and plenty of ACEs. And so 64% of folks, which is way more than half, admit to having ACEs. So I'm not the only one. It is incredibly burdensome to this country. And I don't know if it's ever possible to get rid of every adverse childhood experience, but I think we do need to really focus on doing what we can in order to provide resources for struggling families. So to talk a little bit about ACEs, just remember that, ACEs last forever. ACEs will have a lasting negative impact on a lot of different functionalities of the person. They can grow up and not be able to process emotions, like myself. Processing emotions are very, very difficult for me. They always have been. It's a little bit better now, but it's not nearly probably what it could be. Folks with prolonged stress from ACEs, they can develop learning issues. They can develop memory issues. They can develop functionality issues. They can be difficult to employ. They can develop immediate gratification issues. So you know, it's a big, big problem. You know, mental health, mood disorders are linked to people with increased adverse childhood experiences. And it can be also very, very difficult to establish stable, healthy relationships, which it has been for me as well. I have a lot of trust issues. I don't trust very many people in this life. I'm working on that. But it has been very difficult to maneuver my life, being kind of the only person that gives a shit about me, if that makes any sense. So they're a real thing. This is me blackout drunk at a football game when I was in college. I think this was probably right before I went to med school, maybe my senior year. I was also 350 pounds, by the way. So not only was the alcohol destroying my mind and my relationships and my functionality, it was also destroying my body. At this point, not only being 350 pounds, but I had developed a lot of rectal bleeding most every day. I was also vomiting on a daily basis like my father did. I would have pancreatitis every so often. I didn't get it all the time, but I definitely had it. Every once in a while, I'd get jaundice. I would get scleroicterus to the point where people would start asking me questions, and I would always have some excuse. I was a remarkable survivor, like we all are. We learn how to survive when we're trying to hide the thing that we hate and love the most, which was my drinking. Yeah, I was not a very healthy person at all. Again, I got through med school. I ended up doing okay. I think okay. I ended up getting into, I'm sorry, not med school, but college. I ended up getting into med school at the West Virginia School of Osteopathic Medicine in my hometown of Lewisburg. They had no clue that I was as bad or as severe with my use disorder as I was. I knew a lot of people at that school. It was my hometown. It's a small town, by the way. We all knew each other. But me being in college for 4 years, they didn't know exactly, you know, to the depths of the severity that my illness became. When I went to med school, I was pretty darn severe with my alcohol use disorder. I didn't make a lot of friends. I didn't want to make a lot of friends. I isolated quite a bit. Every once in a while, I would attempt to go to the gym. And I would attempt to go to parties and get-togethers after tests, but it just never felt right. I only wanted to hang out with people who drank like me and who thought like me, which no one did. So I ended up being by myself most of the time. And if I had to do it all over again, it's one of my biggest amends. I would love to have had a different experience those 4 years. I met a lot of amazing people that I wish I could have made a relationship with. And I'm going to spend probably the rest of my life trying to do that. And thank you, Dr. Gum, for showing me some generosity. I appreciate that. But yeah, I got through school fairly unscathed. There was an incident in my 3rd year of medical school where I got super blackout drunk and ended up going to the hospital. My parents called the ambulance, and the ambulance brought me to the hospital. And it just happened to be the hospital that I was doing rotations at, and so there were a lot of questions. Hey, why was your blood alcohol 0.45? You know, why were you like this and like that? You know, I made up a bunch of, lies, and they made me do this and that. Anyway, long story short, I got myself out of it, like I always have. And I hid my addiction mostly through 3rd and 4th year of medical school. Graduated. I did my residency training at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center in family medicine. My dad, my first year, I got married my first year to my long-term girlfriend at the time. And my dad soon developed stage 4 small cell lung cancer. He was not only a 3-pack a day smoker, but he worked with a lot of different chemicals. And so, that hit me pretty hard in residency. I always had resentments to my dad. I always wanted to know why I wasn't good enough. And I wanted that relationship, you know, that Leave It to Beaver Brady Bunch relationship that everybody else had, or at least they did on TV. And, you know, why didn't my dad do that with me? And now he was going to die. And so I was angry. I was angry at the world. I was angry at myself. I was angry at everything. And so the only entity, the only thing that helped me feel better, the only thing that would take that pain away was Jim Beam. So right around my second year of medical school, I started daily drinking, and I started around a pint of Jim Beam, and I escalated it up to about a fifth of Jim Beam, a little bit more on the weekends, but it was definitely daily. I think it was December or January, my second year of medical school. I got super depressed. And one Saturday, when my little brother and my wife went out to go grocery shopping, I was drinking a bottle of Jim Beam at 10 in the morning, and I decided that I had had enough. And so I took my 9mm out of my safe and I put it in my mouth, and I pulled the trigger, but the clip didn't go off. And it just so happened that my wife walked in about 5 minutes later, saw the gun in my mouth. She called the police. The police came, the big SWAT team came and escorted me down to Western Psychiatric Hospital for an evaluation. And that was kind of the first, I think that was the first time that anybody else outside of my family unit knew that something was a problem. Like I said, I hid it pretty well all through training. I was kind of your model resident. I would always volunteer for shifts. I would always, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, whatever you need. You know, you want me to look this up? Sure, I'll be more than happy to look it up. You want me to take this call shift? Sure, just tell me what you need. I always wanted to please other people. I always, that helped me be less insecure. And so, they had no clue. And so once I got out, my residency director, obviously he knew. And so I got a 2-week break, and I had to meet with him. There was a bunch of HR things that happened. The one thing that did not happen, and I'll talk about later, was being referred to the Pennsylvania Physicians Health Program. They handled it internally, which probably was not the best thing looking back, because it was very easy to manipulate, very easy to get around. They said that they would randomly drug test me, they would randomly do this and that, and I had to go to counseling and all this other stuff. Well, I didn't do any of that. So again, I just it was kind of a half-assed approach to not only identifying somebody who with a need, but also getting them the resources that they needed in order to get better. So it allowed essentially my addiction to go unscathed. I graduated residency. I had no clue what I wanted to do. I hated everything at this time. The only emotion that I could feel was anger. My dad passed away. Actually, it'll be 10 years at the end of this month, August 31st, 2010. He passed away, and it was really, really difficult. When I became an attending, I couldn't feel any emotions whatsoever, just anger and hate. I hated myself. I hated everybody else. I hated my dad. I hated Jim Beam. I loved Jim Beam. I hated medicine. I hated everything. My son was born. My first son was born around that time, a couple months earlier. I wasn't really present very much the first probably year of his life. My addiction really went pretty severe, pretty extreme, pretty quick. I jumped from one job to another. I just couldn't find anything. I went from family medicine to the emergency room, back to family medicine, back to the emergency room. Nothing fit. I didn't fit. Nothing was making sense. I just did not fit. And so it all came to a crashing end, thank goodness, in 2016. December 9th, 2016 is my sobriety date. 2010, 2016 is my sobriety date. December 9th, 2016 is the last day that I ingested any substances. I remember it like it was yesterday. A couple of my physician extenders were having a Christmas party and invited me to come. Normally, at this point, my entire life consisted around either going to work or hiding in the basement and drinking bottle, passing out. I would pass out in both my pee and my poop. I would write my name and poop on the walls. I would punch holes in the walls. I would wake up on a fairly often, riddled with blood. At this point, my wife really wanted nothing to do with me. She took the kids. Most of the time I was by myself, except when I wasn't working. At this point, she was making plans to leave me. So on this night, when I was invited, normally I would say no. Again, all I wanted to do was hang out with people who drank like me, and no one drank like me. So, but for some reason, I decided to say, yeah, I think that'd be a wonderful idea. So I did. I had to drink a fifth of Jim Beam just to get to my baseline, just so I wouldn't shake. And so I caught an Uber in the south side of Pittsburgh and just had a great time. People were drinking, they were doing shots, they were playing flip cup, they were doing all these fun things. And for the first time, I was like, man, I get to hang out with people who maybe are like me. That'd be amazing. And so I got blackout drunk, and I don't remember everything, but I was riding back in an Uber to my house at about 3 a.m, and the Uber driver just looked funny, right? I mean, it's people with a substance use disorder. We all know what each other looks like, right? I mean, we know who we are. We know who other people are. So I looked at her and I said, you look like you party. And she's like, yeah, I'm 6 months in recovery from heroin. And I said, really? And so long story short, I convinced her to break her recovery and buy a bundle of heroin. And then she would take half, I would take half, and then she would drop me off, and I would pay for it. Keep in mind, opioids were never my thing to this point. I played a lot of sports when I was in high school. Had some orthopedic injuries, but opioids always made me tired and nauseous, so they just never were my thing. But for some reason this night, they seemed like a really good idea. So she dropped me off. I had 5 baggies of heroin, probably fentanyl, but heroin back in the day, probably, maybe. But anyway, I had no clue what to do with it. So I put all the 5 baggies out on the table like a big line of cocaine and snorted it. And all of a sudden, 3 seconds later, boom, out like a light. The next thing I remember is like a war movie. That's how I describe it. It's like where, a bomb goes off beside a soldier, and, sound and light slowly start to matriculate itself back into the picture. Well, that's kind of how it felt like. And there were 2 paramedics above me. There was a mask around my face. I could tell that. My wife was behind the paramedics, and there was a police officer behind my wife. And at the very top of the stairs was my 3-year-old oldest son crying. And that was by far the worst day of my life. At that point, I had to make a decision. It would either get busy living or get busy dying, to quote the amazing movie Shawshank Redemption. I didn't want to die. I wanted to live, but I didn't know how to do it. They ended up taking me to the hospital, thank goodness. My wife went with me, and in the ER, it's a pretty small world, so the attending was actually a buddy of mine, and my wife just didn't hold back. She let him know every single thing that happened, in the past 15 years of my active addiction. And and his jaw just dropped to the ground, and he ended up connecting me with our boss, and then our boss connected me with HR, and HR connected me with the Physicians Health Program in Pennsylvania. And when I called and talked to those folks, they asked me, well, do you want to go for an evaluation? And I said, I don't need an evaluation. I need treatment. I need someone to help me. I have no clue what to do, and I'm scared, and I just want some help. So I went to Karen. I called Karen Treatment Centers. It's a residential program in Eastern Pennsylvania. I called them on December 10th, and they said they didn't have a bed available till December 14th. They advised me to continue drinking, but only a couple beers, so I wouldn't, get super sick and shake until the 14th, and then my intake appointment would be 3 p.m. Well, I didn't do that. I said, no, I'm done. I just don't want to do it. I don't want anything. And so my wife took the kids, went to her parents' house, and I went in and out of DTs for about 4 days. If there's one thing that you guys can take away from this discussion, there's a right way and a wrong way to detoxify yourself from alcohol, and I did it the wrong way. And it was dangerous. I had numerous seizures. I know it. Woke up, it was the rough 4 days. And at this point, I didn't care if I lived or died. And neither did my wife, to be honest with you. So, but I made it. And on December 14th, my mother-in-law and my wife drove me up to Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and I entered Karen Treatment Facilities. This picture is the night before I went to residential. So this is me trying to put on the best smile that I possibly could. This shell of a human being, soulless, emotionless, empty, without really reason for anything. It was a tough few days. This was me about maybe 4 days into residential. As you can see, I'm pretty pale. I was pretty sick. It was not good. I felt awful. And, but I tell you, I spent 82 days total in residential. I went through a couple different programs. I was in their healthcare unit. Some programs in this country have dedicated healthcare cohorts, and I was part of this healthcare cohort. And so, I really worked on a lot of myself and my trauma, my ACEs, my insecurities, my neuroticism, my catastrophizing, all the things in my brain that will make it harder for me to, remain stable. And what I can say I was great. It was very, very eye-opening. When I got out of treatment, I went back to Pittsburgh and decided that I no longer wanted to work in the emergency room. I knew what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to help other people like me. I wanted to help people who didn't have a path, who felt alone, who felt isolated, who felt like nobody else understood where they were coming from. That's the type of physician I wanted to be. I didn't want to be anything else. And so when I got back to Pittsburgh, I enrolled in the Physicians Health Program. I signed my 5-year contract. I ended up doing some extra training in addiction medicine. And this was before ACGME, by the way. So there were no ACGME fellowships. You just kind of had to wing it and learn from who you could learn from. And luckily I had 2 amazing addiction psychiatrists who taught me, I think, everything I needed to know about how to take care of folks with behavioral challenges, both substance use and process addictions, which not a lot of physicians get that training. So, so I started in addiction medicine, and I tell you, it's been a journey ever since. So I wanted to go over a few statistics with you guys about physicians in recovery and physicians who use substances. So this directly is from the AMA Code of Ethics. So as far as the percentages The percentages of physicians that actually use substances compulsively mirror that of the general population. However, I would argue we are, since we are a cohort of the general population, I would argue that because of the sample size, physicians actually do have a greater percentage of folks with substance use disorder. Now, you could argue, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Did people who were more inclined to develop these process addictions become physicians, or did the rigors of medical education develop these compulsive behaviors? Who knows? But at the end of the day, physicians get sick, and we need to also remember that they are human beings as well. Alcohol is still most commonly used, but they use a lot of other substances, opioids, cocaine. When I was in residential, I remember amphetamines also being something that a lot of physicians talked about, especially folks who work night shifts. But anesthesiologists and emergency room folks, those are the ones with the most proximity to these substances, and they're the highest likelihood to develop these problems. In fact, one of my best buddies from residential, he was my suite mate. He was a pain medicine anesthesiologist. He did his fellowship in pain out of New York, and he had a really, really tough time with opioids, and he ended up getting caught prescribing his fake patients opioids, and he would go to the pharmacy and pick them up himself, and that's how he was caught. So yeah, I mean, it's very, very common. There was another fellow who was a couple rooms down from me. He was a he was a thoracic surgeon, cardiothoracic surgeon, and he would go into the sharps container after cases and steal the fentanyl, and then go into the bathroom and then mainline it. And how he got caught was actually a pretty radical story, pretty intense. He grabbed what he thought was fentanyl. It ended up being not fentanyl. It ended up being what was it? It was Vec. Yeah, that's right. That's what he said. Vecuronium. And so if anyone doesn't know what VEC is, it is a paralytic. So once he realized that's what was going on, he cried for help, and then he had to come clean, and they had to intubate him, the next intubate him once the VEC wore off. There was another trauma surgeon who was mowing his lawn, and there was I guess a strike of lightning. A tree limb came down on his back, ended up breaking a bunch of his ribs, breaking a bunch of his spine. He ended up having chronic pain from that. And so he would steal fentanyl from the sharps container as well, more so for analgesia, but he definitely had criteria for substance use disorder too. So we're all out there for sure. The stories that I heard in residential, I could write a book. It's amazing, the stories and the journeys out there. One of the things I definitely want to make sure that we touch on is the physician's health programs. Every state has one now. I even think California does, or if they don't, I know they're thinking about it. I know they were the last ones holding out. But essentially, these physicians' health programs are there to hopefully provide some confidential referrals and assessments to go to treatment to get folks back to working at some point when they're stable. Before the physicians' health programs really became a commodity, a lot of boards would just issue discipline to physicians. There's no health aspects to it. It would just be, oh, you drink too much. Well, we're going to take your license, and we're going to make sure to put on your license that that you're an impaired physician, and then you're going to have tough times the rest of your career. Well, luckily, we don't have that much anymore. There is a confidential pathway to anonymously report impaired physicians, but also for impaired physicians to report themselves if they are so inclined.
I think we just lost your sound, Dr. Kirby. Looks like he's going to log back on.
Sorry, all. Can everybody hear me? For some reason, my computer scattered out here. Can everyone hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, well, I lost my PowerPoint, but crap. All right, let's see what's going on here. I'll tell you what. Hey, Stephen, can I send this to you, and can you open it up on your end?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay, hold on one second. I apologize, guys. I know we only got 15 minutes left. I really want to save time for questions. Okay, hold on one second. I'll get through this last little bit here. Steve, what's your email?
Email is SRE and then my last name, Schaefer, at arizona.edu.
Okay. At arizona.gov?
Edu.
Oh, okay, sorry. Arizona.edu. Okay, all right. I'll send this to you. Sorry about that, guys. Anyway, while Stephen pulls that up, so I mean, essentially, most PHPs in this country operate fairly similar. They're regulated by the Federation of State PHPs. Most states in this country have one, except for California, but I think they're pretty close to getting one now. They're meant to be a confidential way to have physicians enter programs to avoid disciplinary issues, but they will report to medical boards if and when physicians do not do the things that keep them healthy, or if they're doing things that will affect patient care. Most physicians' health programs will you have to sign a 5-year contract. There are some states where it's a little bit less. Minnesota, for example, alcohol is 3 years and opioids are 5 years. But most states are around 5 years. And then after 5 years, they really don't monitor you after that. They do have some evidence. There is some evidence out there showing over a 90% success rate of physicians making it to 5 years who are enrolled in these PHP programs. And that makes sense, right? I think the rationale that a lot of these PHPs use makes sense to me, but at the same time, I understand it from the other side too. You know, when someone has leverage over you, right? If someone has your career and your
your family's livelihood and all that other stuff over you, of course you're going to kind of jump however high they tell you to jump. And so it makes sense to me that for physicians with a lot to lose, the rates of success are very high. But for the general population returns to use 40 to 60% of the time. We do need to find a better answer for the general population. So, Stephen, do you have the rest of that, or do you have that pulled up?
I do not have the email yet.
Did I not send that to you?
I put my email in the chat there. Yeah, I don't have it yet.
All right, guys, sorry about that. My technical glitches are getting on my nerves. We got 7 minutes left. I'll just, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot left. So I want to make sure I have time for questions. I think I got through most of the stuff on PHPs and ACEs, but what questions do you guys have?
All right. I greatly appreciate you giving your presentation. I don't see any comments in the chat. And if anybody has a question, they're more than welcome to unmic. It's always
Hi, Dr. Gum. This is Emily Scotland. I do have a question for Jason and also a comment. Jason, thank you for sharing that story. I'm overwhelmed right now with what you've been through, both as a child and as an adult. It's amazing. I'm so happy to hear of your recovery. I witnessed in the past a physician who I was very fond of go through something similar, but I never knew the depth of it. And we just never knew who to turn to get him help, because as friends, we would try to talk him into it, but we never got anywhere, of course. But it was just so clearly obvious that he was struggling as you were. You know, what is the chain of command that we would go through to help somebody?
Well, remember, there's obviously, like I said, there's obviously anonymous reporting through the state PHPs. I don't know. Everyone has to make this decision for themselves, but reporting physicians to the medical boards themselves are usually, things end up usually being a lot harder on folks than what they should. So if the state has a physician's health program, the best place to program will, somebody will reach out to the physician and just say that somebody had some sort of concern, and they'll address it. And at least that gets the ball rolling. I'll be honest with you, Emily. That was a great question. Very, very few. In fact, when you look at the numbers of the PHPs, less than 5% of the enrollees from the PHPs actually come in voluntarily. Most of us come in because we did something wrong. We either hurt somebody at work, or we got into a wreck, or we got a DUI, or whatever the case may be. But very, very few of us actually come in the right way, which is because we're scared. We're scared, and we don't know what to do. We're afraid people are going to take our licenses. People are going to take our livelihoods. We have no clue. So there's a lot of fear there. So, but your PHPs would be the best first option, to be honest.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. I went ahead and dropped our link for our Arizona PHP program, along with the site that actually works with the PHP program itself for medical monitoring, the phone number and the email addresses of the leads at that program. And, you can always start off with just providing some information. Both University of Arizona and the VA have EAP programs, or, help for employees to get, maybe it's just depression that they're struggling with and they need to start there. There's a whole spectrum, but there are resources that are out there. And even places like Sierra Tucson in Arizona offer physician-based programs. So there's tons of options.
Any other questions?
Great. Well, I much appreciate you sharing your story. And I will tell you, as a peer in med school, I didn't know in med school you were always the, light at the party, a jovial guy, a great person to be around. So I'm glad that you have found this path and that you're a fellow addiction medicine doc. So.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it too, Dr. Gum. And yeah, and like I said, it's a pleasure to talk with you guys. And if there's ever anything I could do in the future to help you guys out, let me know. And if anybody is struggling out there, if anyone is on the call here that something's not going right, even if you don't know if it's if it's even a problem or to begin with, even if you might be unsure, reach out, because there is help available. And the longer that you wait, typically the worse it gets. Remember, this disease is always progressive, and it's always deadly.
All right. And on that note, right at 1, we'll wrap it up. Thank you again. And that CME number is 278-818 to phone number 866-327-3062. And thank you all for joining us. And we'll be back the next first Thursday of the month.
Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you, Dr. Kirby.
Thanks, guys.